G'day guys, Shawnee from Life and Tennis. So the Jannik Sinner doping case saga continues, guys. WADA has appealed Jannik Sinner's case. Just when we thought that the Sinner doping case was all sorted, WADA threw another spanner in the works. I guess not necessarily unexpected because they did have that 21-day period to appeal his case, the original verdict that was found by the ITIA, but as WADA does sit above the ITIA in terms of anti-doping worldwide authorities, it probably was in their best interest to take the case to court again. It just drags it out maybe more than it necessarily needs to be, and to be honest, this case could drag on for months, maybe even a year, who knows, or longer. So we may not actually get a verdict or an answer later rather than sooner. This case obviously is one that's divided the tennis world, and today I thought I'd talk about the wider implications of WADA's appeal and just the doping case in general, because whatever side of the fence that you sit on, obviously most players, most fans, and anyone that loves tennis, loves what Jannik Sinner does. We all think he's great for the game, and he's just such a genuine, well-spoken. He just carries himself beautifully, So I think most people would argue that he hasn't deliberately done anything wrong, but the other side of that argument is, and if I was to take off my my fan hat off for a second, he did do the wrong thing, even if it wasn't necessarily his fault. He did test positive, and there's been no other player that I can recall that's tested positive and gotten off. And that was where the calls for the preferential treatment crowd were talking about. Difference between, say, number 1 in the world or 400 in the world. Shouldn't be any different at all. They should all the cases should be tried the same way with the same verdict. So, I mean, potentially, he does probably deserve to, or should at least serve some time off court or be suspended or banned or sanctioned by WADA. But I don't think that it should be a lengthy period of time, especially when you take into consideration the severity or lack of the the healing spray that his physio used on him to treat a cut, basically. So I think that WADA should look at all of that, and given the fact that it has already gone through the the courts and I think with the amount of hearings and the amount of courts that it's been through already, and the fact that he's already been found innocent 2 times, I imagine that he will get off again. But I think with WADA that they'll want to make sure they get this right, because if they don't, then the integrity of their organisation and anti-doping bodies in general will be definitely called into question. So, and this is where I can see Nick Kyrgios's argument, because obviously he seems to be a bit of a dialer reaction, media personality, but what he's saying isn't wrong, and I think people's reaction to him has been a bit extreme, especially from very passionate Italian fans. And like Nick does generally run his mouth a bit, and whether you like him or loathe him, he is who he is. He's a genuine person, and what he says most of the time makes a lot of sense. And I think it's just the fact that people just don't like him, like that opinion coming from his mouth. Whereas if it was like someone on the tour currently, like a Medvedev or or even Alcaraz, I don't think we would be jumping down their throat that much. But because it's Kyrgios and because he likes to stoke the fire, there's a lot of people that just instantly react to things that he says, because he's I think he does like to stir the pot a bit. So, well, not a bit, a lot. So, but I think the wider implications that I see anyway for if Sinner was to be found guilty, for example, it can't be good for the sport, because the fact that Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz have, there's been this changing of the guard now. They've shared the 4 Grand Slams this year. I think it's actually been great for the tour to try to raise their level to these 2 players' levels now, and to have one of those 2 players out, the current world number 1, is not a good thing. It's actually not a good result for the sport. So part of me thinks that, he should get off like he had initially, through the ITIA court hearings or findings. But with this wider appeal now, they wouldn't have appealed necessarily if they didn't think they had a strong case to answer for. And they're obviously gunning for 1 to 2 years, which I think is too long a time to sit on the sidelines, considering the lack of severity, or performance enhancing nature of the cluster bowl that he that was found in his blood, because essentially that amount could not have been possibly being performance enhancing, which I think most people would agree with as well. But the part of me that also thinks that maybe he does deserve to serve some time on the sidelines is the fact that he did test positive for that, whether it was his fault or not. So I think, integrity-wise, WADA will want to put their strongest case forward so that they basically dotted all their I's, crossed all their T's, and if he's still found innocent, then they've done what they can do and their integrity has been upheld. But part of me does think that because, Sinner is the only player who has gotten off from a positive doping case, that it would still seem a little bit like preferential treatment. But I think if he's gone through this whole process with not just the ITIA, but with WADA as well, then it'll essentially not just clear his name completely of any sort of wrongdoing, but I think it will hopefully put to bed the whole preferential treatment arguments, because I think WADA are they're impartial. That they don't care whether you're innocent or guilty. They just want to get the fairest outcome possible, and so whatever outcome it is will be the fairest outcome, because they've they're the top body, and they're going to do whatever it takes to put forward the strongest possible case, essentially, against Jannik, basically. So, if he can provide the same argument that he's been providing before, that it wasn't negligence, that they can trace it back to this healing spray, then then I guess he should the same verdict should still apply. But yeah, I guess the main issue is just going to be, what's the fallout going to be, in terms of when this case does go to trial, and even just like Jannik Sinner himself, mentally, because obviously when he was initially, or when it had initially been announced, by the ITIA in August that he had tested positive and he had since been cleared of any wrongdoing, clearly it was playing on his mind in the hard court season leading up to the US Open, because he mentioned it, he talked about it at length, and he also had some injury concerns as well, which would have been playing on his mind as well. So I wonder if this is going to, how much is going to impact his tennis and his mental game as well. Clearly it doesn't seem to be affecting him that much right now, because he's just reached the final of the Beijing Open in China against, facing the next best player in the world, Carlos Alcaraz, or some people out there think he might be better than Sinner, but I think both those guys are clearly the trendsetters right now. He seems to be still in, amazing form, so maybe it's not affecting him. I don't know. He might be, if you're number one player in the world, clearly you can block out a lot of the noise, surrounding you when you're playing a match in the heat of battle. So yeah, who knows what the outcome of this is going to be. As I said, this process by WADA is probably going to be dragged out for potentially a year, maybe longer. And, there's going to be lots of speculation on either side of the fence. But I guess I'm just trying to provide, the pros and the cons and the wider implications for this wider appeal. And as I said, part of me feels like he should be banned and sit on the sidelines for a short amount of time. I think maybe between 6 months and a year would be fair. No longer than a year though. And, based on the severity or lack of severity, as I mentioned before. And then part of me also thinks, like, as a tennis fan and as just someone that's good for the sport, I don't think it would be a good thing if he was banned, basically. And I think also the integrity issue comes into play as well, as I mentioned, in terms of, WADA's integrity and, whether they're following the same due diligence and the same process for every player, or whether there is preferential treatment. I think hopefully if this case comes out and whatever the outcome is, it'll put those arguments to bed. That's the main thing. But that to me is the only thing that's a bit murky right now, because I think that if he is, like, for example, if he's found guilty, then people will be like, yes, integrity's been upheld. Even if you might not agree with the verdict, you can at least probably agree that, other players that have copped similar bans, like, Simona Halep and even Sharapova, copped a ban a while ago for doping charges as well. It'll basically prove that there's no special treatment for, the best players in the world. But then part of me thinks that if he is found innocent, there'll still be that conjecture and there'll still be those question marks as to, is there preferential treatment? But I think an organisation like WADA, I don't think they would appeal this case, like I said, if they didn't think they had the strongest possible case to put forward to sanction him, for for doping, basically. So yeah, anyway, keen to hear your thoughts on this, guys, because this is a part 3 of a doping saga that just continues to drag on, and I think most of us are kind of, in a way, kind of sick of talking about it, but it's unfortunately it's one of those things that it's hard to avoid, and it's also, potentially it's one of those things where could this put the sport of tennis in disrepute a bit? I really hope it doesn't, because, it's a sport we love so much, and we don't want to feel like there's any morally questionable kind of activities going on behind the scenes. So yeah, very keen to hear your thoughts on this latest appeal from WADA, and whether or not whatever side of the fence you sit on. I'm keen to hear your feedback, and whether you think you're in favour of Sinner, whether you're not in favour of Sinner, or whether or not you're in favour of Sinner. Doesn't matter. Whether or not you think that he should cop a sanction or not. Very keen to hear your thoughts, guys. And as always, like and subscribe for more tennis related content. Cheers, guys.